Our next speaker is Anne-Madeleine Goulet from CNRS, and she will be speaking on promoting, patronizing, and practicing the arts in Roman aristocratic families from 1644 to 1740.
Like that. Okay. Well, first, I would to thank the organizers of the European Research Music Conference for giving me the opportunity to talk about how the Perform Art project is progressing after the first 18 months of work, and for allowing me, as well as my colleagues who will speak this afternoon, to exchange with other researchers who share music as a subject of study. I am a CNRS researcher in performance arts at the Centre d'études supérieures de la Renaissance in Tours. And my work focuses on theater, music, and dance in European aristocratic circles, and more precisely on Italy and France in the 17th century. And I am particularly interested in issues regarding cultural transfers on a European scale. And the ERC project I obtained, that is the Perform Art project, consolidator category, is hosted by the CNRS in partnership with the École Française de Rome. And it involves a team of 25 people who work in 8 different countries. The aim of the project is to offer an overview of the material, social, economic, and political history of performance arts in Rome between 1644 and 1740. And the idea is to shift attention from the papal commissions of art and architecture of Baroque Rome to the very many performances involving theater, music, and dance commissioned by the main aristocratic families of the day. Up until now, research has focused on the specific patronage of a particular pope, cardinal, or prince. And our goal is to replace this fragmented approach by working more broadly on the Roman cultural scene without prioritizing either music, theater, or dance, but by considering these arts as elements of a same artistic environment. 11 families were selected. That is approximately half of the main aristocratic families of that time. And besides the obvious contribution to the history of art and performance as such, the project also endeavors to contribute to the history of aristocratic family, the history of home economics, and the study of forms of political engagement. In the history of Roman aristocratic families, the period chosen represents a particular moment of competition whereby these families sought to obtain political influence through the patronage of the arts. And within this context, the arts became an aspect of political action. The project starts in 1644 with the election of Pope Innocent X after the reign of Pope Urban VIII, whom I have deliberately left out since the performance arts of this period have already been studied in depth. And it ends in 1740 with the death of the great patron Cardinal Pietro Ottoboni. And this date corresponds to the end of what is known as minor nepotism. And nepotism refers to the tendency of certain pontiffs to favor their relatives, especially their nephews, without taking into account the normal selection processes. why did I want to set up this project? And I sometimes have to remind myself of these deep-seated motivations to understand why I have taken on such a heavy load. And more to the point, why did Europe agree to fund us? First point, there is no history of performance arts in Rome for the period I am interested in. In our field of study, where the borders between disciplines are very rigid, individualism has always triumphed. Knowledge is scattered in dozens and dozens of studies written in every possible language. A musicologist can work on a musician who served a Roman prince without taking an interest in the work conducted by an art historian on a painter in the service of the same prince, and vice versa. Furthermore, the fragmented existing knowledge is very partial, since no wide-scale systematic research has ever been undertaken on Roman family archives, with such a chronological range and from an interdisciplinary angle. I therefore felt it was vital to be able to create a synergy with a large interdisciplinary and international team. Secondly, the study of the Roman world of performance, musical, theatrical, and choreographical in the 17th and 18th centuries, through the study of 11 family archives, offers interesting comparisons with contemporary cultural activity. It enables us to reflect upon the birth of entrepreneurship, upon the notion of cultural consumption, upon the search for distinction, according to Pierre Bourdieu's sense of the term, which extends beyond the primary meaning of the term, that is the ability to establish distinctions and value as an excellent manner of being. Bourdieu shows to what extent our tastes and lifestyles are determined by our social position. And finally, it enables us to reflect upon the importance of cultural transfers on a European scale. Third point, the project is based on an idea that is strongly rooted in European societies. That is that the arts enable communication through nations. This was, in fact, a very widespread idea in the 17th century. Take, for instance, Father Ménestrier, who asserted the universality of music, dance, and performances, and demonstrated, especially in his treatise Old and Modern Ballet, to what extent performance arts could be useful in terms of international politics. If I ask you what the first thing an ambassador would organize today when arriving in a new country, what would you reply? Dance. Oh, no. Today. Anyone? A concert. He would organize a concert. And yet very little thought has been given to the origin of this idea. And I thought it was essential to understand why this idea became so important precisely in the second half of the 17th century and at the beginning of the next one. Fourth point, Rome, with its unique position as the capital of Christianity and the density of European diplomatic representation, is of particular interest because it was witness to the birth of a shared European cultural language, which served as a melting pot. And within the context of the social, cultural, and political crisis that Europe is experiencing today, it may well be useful to examine the past. And penultimate point, in a somewhat more secondary manner, a study of patronage may be useful to help us understand why, within the context of the state's gradual withdrawal, which is the case in France and in Italy today, should private individuals become patrons and pay to subsidize culture. Here too, the example of the 17th and 18th century, before state support was invented, could be very interesting. And last point, finally, our work may have side effects that are absolutely decisive for the performers, since we have been able to unearth forgotten music scores and plays. Just let me show you something. Here. On 5 December 2016, we organized a concert at the Palazzo Farnese in Rome, which was the perfect example of the type of result we were hoping for. I suggested to the Faenza Early Music Ensemble, directed by Marco Orvat, that they elaborate a program based on a collection of polyphonic madrigals by Ercole Bernabei, the Concerto Madrigalesco a tre voci diverse, published in Rome in 1669 and dedicated to Flavio Orsini, the head of the Francophile party in Rome. And before Performart began, a long investigation into the Orsini family archives allowed me to shed light on the links that bound the composer to this Roman prince, and to understand that these madrigals were composed for a concert that took place in the Orsini family's palace in Rome. And just to give you an idea of the type of music we are working on, I would like to make you listen. Just for the pleasure. While the project is based on a central idea, which I have just explained to you, it is also a deliberate methodological proposal. The project will last 60 months, and we are at the beginning of the 20th. And the first 3 years are devoted to the intensive collection of as much data as possible, and entering and organizing it in our database. The 11 archives were divided between 18 different researchers, with some of them choosing to focus on a single collection, while others opted for cross-sectional research. The archives were chosen according to several criteria: their accessibility, which is no small detail when it comes to the collections kept at the Vatican or in private archives. Their representativeness, the researchers, and finally the researchers' possible familiarity with these collections. And I leave you to imagine the many discussions that presided over this distribution, and I quickly had to acquire significant mediation skills. And since the beginning of the project, a few collections had to be added because they contained documents that were of interest in relation to the selected families. To support and rationalize our team's work, we are helped by two professional archivists. Just let me... Okay, this is the team, the complete team. Very women's team, as you can see. And you can have, for instance, I just take some... For instance, Marco Cavietti, who will speak this afternoon. These archivists work very closely with the researchers in order to prepare their arrival in Rome and to guide and help them to solve the many difficulties they face. The collaborations that have taken place over the past 18 months have been extremely fruitful. Marco Cavietti will explain his methods to you this afternoon based on concrete examples. And I place a lot of emphasis on this collaboration because it is a process concerning the rationalization and pooling of skills that until now were totally non-existent in our field. And now a few words about our database, which was developed by a computer expert, Foucault-Perrotin, in the form of a 4D application based on well-defined specifications and a permanent dialogue with the project's scientific leaders. It will be presented to you in detail this afternoon by Michela Berti, who is the project's administrator, among other things. One of the project's main challenges is to coordinate the research on the 11 family archives and to organize and analyze the findings in order to make comparisons between the different personal investigations for the purpose of our collective publications and to ensure that they are useful to other researchers once the project has ended. A workshop is held every 3 months, which allows us to reflect together upon the development of our tool. And this data will remain confidential until the final month of the project. The relevant data will then be made available to the public through a dynamic web site in association with Humanum, a very large CNRS research infrastructure that allows digital data to be permanently saved and provides unified access to it within the field of human sciences. The files relating to the sources, whether these are transcripts of documents in a rich format, taking into account all the subtleties that deserve to be recorded, the description of tangible objects or iconographic documents bear the signature of their author. And besides the multi-criteria searches permitted by the application for the end users, additional functionalities will allow us to produce different types of reports in a largely automated way. Family trees, prosopographies, professional social networks, catalog of sources and works, cartographies and chronologies, and statistics. For instance, we would like to produce a graph showing the annual periods of use of the family's holidays villas and city palaces. And we would also like to elaborate a dynamic map that locates the different families, places and residence, palace, vineyard, suburban villa, holiday villa, and another one that locates the families in the city according to their political label. Just to give you an idea of the place where we are working. Just, for instance, here, and well, you can have a description of all the villas and palaces on our website. There is one last element regarding our database that I would like to highlight. For the past 2 months, two of my colleagues, Marco Cavietti and Michela Berti, have been working on the construction of a thesaurus. That is a controlled vocabulary that allows us to organize the knowledge we are collecting on performance arts in Rome during the Baroque era and optimize information searches. And this thesaurus is essential for the conceptual description of our body of work, so of our documents, composed of extremely diverse sources. And during the first study day organized by my colleagues, we were able to benefit from the advice of the team of the Nuovo Soggettario program, which is a program of the National Central Library of Florence. This is a subject-based index system for Italian libraries, archives and documentation centers that could serve as a model for us. And we have just signed a convention with the director of the library, and the specific terminology of our thesaurus on performance arts will be integrated into the Nuovo Soggettario at the end of the project. So this database, as you can see, is a key part of the Performart scheme, and it is both one of the project's deliverables, to use the ERC terminology, and a tool to achieve our final synthesis. And I thought about it for a long time before the project started. In relation to the databases I had used before, and wondered how I could transform very diverse texts, objects, facts, institutions, and the people we are working on into data, and how the design and use of a database can shape research practices. And I also reflected on the type of history that such an instrument can help or not to write. In parallel to the research into archives, 12 seminars have been planned during the first 3 years, and you can find a detailed account of each of these events on the website. 6 of them have already been done, and they enable us to consolidate our ideas thanks to the contribution of specialists from various backgrounds, though not necessarily specialists in specializing in Rome or our period of study. And the organization of every session is entrusted to 1 or 2 members of the team. And several themes have thus been dealt with since 18 months. Just For instance, last September, Elodie Oriol, who will speak this afternoon, questioned the value of art by looking into how economic history can contribute to the analysis of performances. Yes. Besides individual publications, two collective works are planned within the framework of the project. And I would like to mention the first one here, which I am currently preparing with José María Domínguez, who teaches at the University of La Rioja, and Elodie Oriol. And it will be thematic issues of the Mélange de l'École française de Rome, currently entitled Shows and Performance in Rome. And it is based on the following observation. It is impossible to view performances of shows from the past owing to their ephemeral nature, and early sources only provide us with a very fragmented account. But does this mean we should give up writing their history? And these performances did leave traces, remains, which it is up to the researcher to find. And they can serve as a starting point for an analysis and also call upon historical imagination. How much time do I have? Pretty much. Okay, so it's okay. Thank you. And to address the challenge of studying these performances, which are by definition unique and impossible to repeat, recourse to the concept of performance is very useful. And this exogenous notion provides an interpretive space where our documentary approach, prospects for analysis, and the historical account we would like to propose can come together. The whole team will gather at the University of La Rioja on 25 and 26th October 2018, where our colleague José María Domínguez teaches, in order to continue the reflection and benefit from exchanges with Spanish musicologists and historical researchers. A second work, which I shall be editing in collaboration with Michela Berti, will offer a reflection on the concept of princely munificence in Rome in the 17th and 18th century, based on the systematic comparison of the 11 families included in the project. And we shall focus on showing how Roman munificence, under the guise of offering gifts, was an effective form of action on an aesthetic, political, and social level. And by analyzing the performances organized by Roman aristocrats, we will show how they were focused on building the aesthetic and social image of their family and on a goal to bring together large audiences and famous performers in their homes within an ostensibly extravagant framework. Before I conclude, I would like to rapidly mention the difficulties inherent to managing such a project. We didn't talk a lot these days of the difficulties, but I would like to talk of it. The first one relates to the size of the team. Coordinating the work of 25 people spread over 8 countries, a task I share with Michela Berti, is no mean feat. Just a small point concerning how we work together. Michela, with whom I'm in contact every day, coordinates the team in Rome, while I have chosen to remain in France, in Versailles. However, I go to Rome for a week, once a month, so that I can visit the archives and work with the team. And the research center at the Palace of Versailles has allowed me to come and work there for the duration of my project, which is a fantastic opportunity as this gives me access to the museum's collections and puts me in contact with historians and art historians specializing in European courts. Second difficulty, it has been a real exercise in diplomacy as regards the institutions and private individuals who have opened their doors to us in order to gain access to their archives and to work in good conditions. Third point, the European aspect of this research is not yet well understood or accepted as regards how academic institutions work. Members of the Italian University asked me on several occasions how a project such as this one can be attributed to a non-Italian researcher. Last point, one of the project's major assets, that is the development of an interdisciplinary and international reflection, is also one of the potential pitfalls. We have to constantly take into account national historiographical traditions and agree on what we are going to write. But these difficulties, even if they are very real, pale into insignificance when we consider the results that the database and the seminars now allow us to hope for. And I shall end my presentation here with the hope of now discussing the subject further with you and being able to benefit from your comments. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for a fascinating talk. Do we have a quick question? I realize it's lunchtime. Yes.
Did you say that you are going to wait until the last month of the project to publish things, or
no,
something?
to publish the database, to give access to the database.
And wouldn't it be better to start doing it before? Because what about if it fails?
Yes, but did you ever work in Italy and in Italian archives?
Okay.
No, just perhaps to say something, we are working very closely with our developer, and I think it's something that he has in his mind, and I think we will be ready on the D-Day. I'm sure we will.
All right. I guess at this point, we've finished with all of the talks for the session. Let's thank all of our speakers, and then let's see if Xavier has some announcements to make. No.
Just lunch, and we meet here at 2:30. That's all.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and I'll see you back.